She had her skirt yanked up in front of the entire American elite right under the spotlight. A young groomsman shouted, "Want to see the panties of a broke wedding guest?" The whole ballroom erupted in laughter. Some recorded it. Others pretended not to see. No one stopped it. She simply pulled her skirt back down, turned, and walked away in silence, her hands steady, her face unreadable. 3 minutes later, the most powerful man in finance walked into the ballroom, took her hand, and asked, "Who just did that to my wife?" The room went still, the air heavy as the truth began to unravel. Emily Brooks stood in the grand foyer of the Malibu 7-star hotel, her cream linen dress brushing her calves soft under the glow of towering chandeliers. Her flat sandals, plain and scuffed from years of use, clicked faintly on the polished marble floor. She carried a fabric bag over one shoulder, its stitching worn but clean, a quiet contrast to the glittering clutches around her. No, makeup touched her face. Her skin was clear, her hazel eyes sharp yet calm, her dark hair loosely tied back, a few strands slipping free. At 30, Emily's beauty was understated, the kind that didn't shout but held you if you lingered. The wedding invitation had come from Lauren Holloway, a college dorm mate who sent it out of duty. Not warmth, a nod to shared history, now faded. Emily didn't belong in this world of oil magnates, governors, and celebrities, but she came anyway, her presence quiet, her posture forged in a childhood of wealth and strict discipline. Raised in one of the country's most powerful families, she'd been taught to value restraint over flash, dignity over display. Nobody here knew that. They saw her plain dress, her bare fingers, and judged her before she spoke, their eyes slicing her apart as she moved toward the ballroom. The foyer was a whirlwind of opulence, guests in shimmering gowns and bespoke tuxedos, their laughter sharp as broken glass, their glances sharper. Emily navigated the crowd, her steps measured her eyes, scanning for a familiar face, finding none. A woman in a sequined red dress, mid-40s with a diamond choker that screamed old money, stepped into her path. "The reception desk is over there," she said, pointing with a manicured nail, her voice dripping with false kindness. "Beverage service is in the back." "You're early, hon." Her friends clutching champagne flutes exchanged smirks, their eyes raking over Emily's sandals like they were an offense. Emily paused, her hand resting on her bag strap, her fingers still. "I'm here as a guest," she said, her tone gentle but firm, like stating a fact, not pleading. The woman blinked, then laughed, a high piercing sound that echoed off the marble walls. "A guest? In that outfit? Oh, sweetheart, you're precious." Her friends joined in their giggles, bouncing, drawing curious glances. Emily didn't flinch, stepping around them, her sandals silent now, her face steady but her knuckles tightened briefly on her bag. A valet barely out of his teens stood in the foyer's corner, his hands clasped behind his back, his uniform stiff with starch. He'd watched Emily arrive earlier, noticed the quiet confidence in her walk, the way she didn't fuss with her hair or check her reflection. When the woman in the red dress laughed, he winced, his fingers twitching. He'd overheard the hotel staff whispering about a VIP named Brooks, someone who always took the same suite, tipped generously, and never raised her voice. He glanced at Emily's bag, saw the faint monogram E.B., and his breath caught. He wanted to speak to stop the woman's cackle, but his manager's glare pinned him in place. His jaw clenched, his heart sinking as Emily moved toward the hallway, the laughter trailing her like a cruel wind, her steps soft but resolute. Before reaching the ballroom, Emily passed a group of young socialites near a champagne fountain, their designer gowns glittering like stars. One, a tall brunette in a sapphire dress, her lips painted crimson, smirked and called out, "What they let the laundry staff in now?" Her friends laughed, their voices loud, slicing through the foyer's hum. "Look at that dress," another said, her voice nasal. "Bet it's older than this hotel." The brunette stepped closer, her heels clicking. "Sweetie, the service entrance is outside." "You're embarrassing yourself." Emily stopped, her sandals flat on the marble, her eyes meeting the brunette's. "I'm here for the wedding," she said, her voice low, steady like an anchor dropped. The brunette laughed, tossing her hair. Sure, like they'd invite someone who looks homeless. The group cackled, drawing more eyes, their phones peeking out to snap photos. Emily's fingers brushed her bag, her posture unchanged, but her grip tightened, the faintest tremor in her wrist, before she walked on, their laughter echoing in her wake. The ballroom doors loomed, flanked by guards in silk vests, their eyes scanning invitations. Emily handed hers over, her fingers steady despite the foyer's sting. One guard, a grizzled man with a scar above his brow, glanced at her dress, then her name. His eyes flickered, recognizing Brooks from the VIP list. He nodded, his voice gruff but kind. "Right this way, ma'am." He held the door, ignoring a nearby guest's scoff. Emily stepped through her sandals, clicking her bag slung low. The guard watched her go, his hand lingering on the door, a quiet respect in his gaze. He'd seen the elite tear people down, but something about Emily, her calm, her refusal to shrink, made him pause. He muttered to his partner, "That one's different," and returned to his post, the foyer's laughter fading behind the heavy doors. If you're watching this and Emily's story is hitting you, maybe you've been judged for how you look, maybe you've been laughed at for being yourself, could you do me a favor? Pull out your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means everything to keep sharing stories like hers, stories about people who stand tall when the world tries to knock them down. All right, let's keep going. The ballroom was a vision of excess gold-rimmed plates, crystal centerpieces soaring above tables, a string quartet weaving Mozart beneath a frescoed ceiling of angels and clouds. Emily found her seat near the back, her name on a card in swirling gold script. She sat her fabric bag on her lap, her hands resting lightly, her posture straight but unassuming. The crowd swirled around her. Finance moguls, senators, pop stars, their voices loud, their egos louder. A tech billionaire in a velvet jacket, his beard trimmed to perfection, leaned toward his date, a model with cascading curls. "Check out the thrift store, reject," he muttered, nodding at Emily's sandals. The model giggled, her eyes glinting with malice. "What's she here to bus tables?" she said, her voice carrying across the table. Emily's fingers tightened on her bag, but she didn't glance over. She reached for her water glass, her movements slow, like she was steadying herself against a rising tide. At the cocktail hour, a fashion influencer, early 30s with a platinum bob and a dress slashed to her navel, sauntered to Emily's table, her phone recording. "Hey girl," she called, her voice loud. Performative love, the minimalist vibe, but this is a wedding, not a soup kitchen. Nearby guests chuckled, phones turning to capture the moment. She zoomed in on Emily's sandals, narrating, "These shoes are giving dollar store realness." Her live feed buzzed with laughing emojis, comments piling up. Emily set her glass down, her eyes meeting the influencers. "Enjoy the wedding," she said, her voice calm, slicing through the noise. The influencer faltered, her phone dipping, but she laughed it off, strutting away. "No clapback," she told her friends, her voice sharp. Emily's hand rested on her bag, her fingers still but her jaw tightened, the laughter burning her ears like a brand. A real estate heiress, mid-20s with a spray tan and a diamond tiara perched in her blonde hair, sat across from Emily. She leaned forward, her silk gown rustling like dry leaves. Excuse me," she said, her tone dripping with fake concern. "Did you miss the dress code?" "It's absolute luxury, not whatever that is." Her friends in matching pastel gowns nodded, their smiles sharp as knives. "No offense," the heiress added, her eyes wide with mock pity, "but you're killing the aesthetic." The table laughed, the sound spreading to nearby seats, a low, cruel hum. Emily set her glass down, her eyes meeting the heiress's. "I'm fine with my choice," she said, her voice soft but steady like a river carving stone. The heiress blinked, thrown off, then scoffed. "Fine. Girl, this isn't a flea market." The laughter swelled, phones peeking out to snap photos, eyes turning to stare. Emily folded her napkin, her hands calm, her silence louder than their jeers. A junior event planner hovering near the table overheard the heiress's barb. She'd spent months on the wedding, seen the guest list, and noticed Emily's name flagged as a priority. As the laughter faded, she darted to the head table, whispering to the lead planner. "That's Emily Brooks they're mocking. Blackwell's architect. We need to fix this." The lead planner's eyes widened, her clipboard trembling. She nodded, texting the hotel manager, her fingers frantic. The junior planner glanced at Emily, who sat still, her hands folded, her face serene. A surge of respect hit her, her heart racing as she returned to her post, sensing the room was about to shift, the air already crackling with change. Lauren Holloway, the bride, swept into the ballroom, her white lace gown trailing like a cloud, her smile polished for the flashing cameras. She spotted Emily and froze, her eyes narrowing for a split second. "Emily," she said, her voice loud enough to draw attention, "you're still your usual self, huh? Not worried about all the cameras?" A bridesmaid in a tight emerald dress leaned close, her whisper sharp. "She showed up like that. Looks like she's cosplaying a motel clerk." The other bridesmaids giggled, their hands covering their mouths, their eyes darting to Emily. Lauren's smile tightened, but she didn't hush them. Emily looked up, her face calm, her expression unyielding. "Congratulations, Lauren," she said, her voice even, like offering a gift despite the sting. Lauren hesitated, then turned away, her laughter joining the bridesmaids as they glided toward the head table. Emily's fingers brushed the edge of her chair, gripping it briefly before letting go, her knuckles whitening for a moment. As Lauren moved off, a society matron, late 60s, with a sapphire brooch and a perm as rigid as her posture, leaned toward her table mates. "That girl's an embarrassment," she said, her voice carrying over the quartet's music, "dressed like she's here to scrub floors. Who even invited her?" Her friends in vintage Chanel nodded, one fanning herself with a program. "Probably a pity invite, another added bet she's here for the free food." The table laughed, their voices blending with the strings. Emily paused, her fork halfway to her mouth, then set it down, her hands folding in her lap. She didn't look over, but her shoulders stiffened, the weight of their words pressing like a vice. The matron kept going, her voice rising. "She's got no business here, looking like a charity case." The table's laughter grew, heads turning, eyes pinning Emily in place. A waiter, mid-30s, with tired eyes and a crisp uniform, approached Emily's table, balancing a tray of appetizers. He'd served the hotel's elite for years, seen their cruelty up close. As he offered Emily a crab tart, he noticed her hands steady, no rings, no polish, but strong, like they'd held heavier things than a napkin. He'd overheard the matron's jab, seen Emily's face stay still. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low, "you're at the wrong table for that kind of talk." He nodded toward the head table, his eyes warm. Emily met his gaze, her lips curving just a fraction, a flicker of gratitude. "Thank you," she said, taking the tart. He lingered a moment, then moved on his tray lighter, his heart heavier, wishing he could shield her from the room's venom as the laughter started up again. The hotel manager, David, a slim man in a black suit with a silver name tag, pushed through the crowd, his face brightening when he saw Emily. He stopped at her table, ignoring the heiress's raised eyebrow, and bowed slightly. "Good evening, Miss Brooks," he said, his voice warm, professional, cutting through the table's hush. "Your VIP suite upstairs is ready as always. I apologize for any confusion earlier." The table went silent. The heiress's fork clattered against her plate, her tiara slipping slightly. The tech mogul coughed, his date smile freezing mid-sip. Emily nodded, her face unchanged, her eyes meeting David's with quiet acknowledgement. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice soft, like thanking a friend. David smiled, then slipped away, leaving the table in a stunned hush. The heiress stared at Emily, her mouth half open, then muttered something to her friends, her voice low and sharp. Emily adjusted her bag on her lap, her movements precise, like she was closing a chapter. The dinner courses arrived: caviar on blinis, lobster bisque, truffle risotto, each plate a work of art served with flourishes by white-gloved staff. Emily ate quietly, her fork moving with care, her eyes on her plate, her presence almost invisible amid the clinking glasses and boisterous chatter. A hedge fund manager, late 50s, with a Rolex glinting under his cuff, leaned back in his chair at a nearby table. "Who's the nun?" he said, his voice loud, nodding at Emily's plain dress. "Bet she's here on a charity pass." His table laughed, their wine glasses clinking in agreement. "Probably crashed the open bar," his wife added, her pearls bouncing as she chuckled. Emily paused, her fork halfway to her mouth, then set it down, her hands folding in her lap. She didn't look their way, but her shoulders stiffened just for a moment, the laughter landing like stones. The manager's words hadn't reached this table, and the jabs kept coming, each one heavier than the last. A young photographer hired to capture candids for the wedding's social media moved through the ballroom, her camera clicking softly. She'd noticed Emily early on, drawn to her quiet presence amid the glitz, the way she sat unbothered by the chaos. As the hedge fund manager's laugh boomed, she zoomed in on Emily's face, calm, but with a flicker of something in her eyes like a storm held back. The photographer lowered her camera, her heart racing. She'd seen Emily's name on the guest list, cross-checked it with the hotel's VIP log during a break. "Brooks," she whispered, recalling a rumor about a low-key billionaire who shunned the spotlight. She snapped another shot, this one of Emily's hands steady on her bag, and moved on, her mind spinning, hoping her photos would tell the story nobody else saw. During the appetizer course, a corporate lawyer, early 40s, with slicked back hair and a pinstripe suit, leaned toward his table mates, his voice carrying over the clink of silverware. "Look at her," he said, nodding at Emily. "Bet she's here to scam a rich husband. That dress screams desperate." His table laughed, one woman in a ruby gown fanning herself. "She's probably got a sob story ready," she added, her voice dripping with scorn. "What's next? Begging for a job." The lawyer smirked, raising his glass. To the gold digger in linen. The toast drew more laughs, heads turning to stare. Emily paused, her spoon still in the bisque, then set it down, her hands folding again. She didn't glance over, but her lips pressed into a thin line. The weight of their words, a physical thing. She lifted her water glass, her hands steady, and sipped her silence a quiet defiance. A sommelier pouring wine at a nearby table overheard the lawyer's toast. He'd served Emily before years ago at a Blackwell charity event. Same plain dress, same quiet grace. She'd thanked him by name, left a tip that paid his rent. When the lawyer laughed, he gripped the bottle, his knuckles whitening. He leaned toward a server, his voice low. That's Emily Brooks, Blackwell's wife. These clowns are done. The server's eyes widened, glancing at Emily, who sat still, her hands folded. The sommelier nodded, pouring with extra care, his mind racing, knowing the night was about to flip. He watched Emily, her calm, unshaken, and felt a quiet pride, like he was cheering for her from the sidelines. The lights dimmed, and a massive projection screen lit up behind the head table, scrolling the honored guests in gold script. Senators, CEOs, a Grammy-winning singer, then one name stopped the room cold. Emily Brooks, strategic architect, Blackwell Global Holdings. Whispers erupted, phones flashed, fingers tapping screens furiously. A finance bro at a nearby table pulled up his browser, his voice hushed but urgent. Blackwell Holdings. They bankroll half the bride's family's resorts. Billions. His friend leaned over, eyes wide. She's their architect. That's not just money, that's power. Emily sat still, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on the screen, her face serene. The heiress across the table shifted in her seat, her tiara catching the light as she looked away, her fingers twisting her napkin. The room buzzed, the air shifting, but Emily didn't move, her silence a force that filled the space. Before the main course, a celebrity chef, mid-40s with a TV show and a grin too wide for his face, stood near Emily's table chatting with adoring guests. He spotted her, his eyes narrowing at her plain dress, and called out loud enough for nearby tables. Hey, miss you catering tonight? Got any discount sandwiches in that bag? The crowd laughed, some clapping, others snapping photos. He mimed taking a bite, winking at his fans. Bet she's got stale bread in there, he added, his grin broadening. Emily stood to join the group photo, her skirt brushing her knees, her face blank. She glanced at him, her eyes steady, unyielding. Enjoy your moment, she said, her voice low, cutting like a blade. He laughed, but it was forced, his grin slipping as she walked toward the photo line, the laughter trailing her like smoke. The group photo was next, a tradition for the wedding party and close guests. Emily stood at the edge of the group, her linen dress plain among the sequins and silk, her posture straight but unobtrusive. A young groomsman, barely 20, with slicked back hair and a cocky grin, slipped behind her. As the photographer called for a smile, he grabbed the hem of Emily's skirt and yanked it up, shouting, "Want to see what secondhand boutique models wear underneath?" The ballroom exploded in laughter, phones flashing, some guests clapping like it was a stunt. Emily froze, her skirt halfway up her thighs, the spotlight hot on her skin. She pulled it down, her hands steady, her face blank, the room's roar deafening. She turned her eyes, locking onto the groomsman's, and said, "You done?" Her voice was quiet, but it sliced through the noise like a knife. He laughed, but it was shaky, his friends nudging him away. Emily walked off her steps, even the laughter still ringing in her ears, a weight she carried but didn't show. A coat check attendant, young and overworked, saw the skirt incident from her post near the ballroom entrance. Her hands trembled as she hung a guest's fur coat, her eyes fixed on Emily. She'd been mocked herself, called help by guests who didn't tip her own clothes, judged too plain for the job. When Emily passed, their eyes met, and the attendant leaned forward, mouthing, "You're strong." The words were barely a whisper, lost in the crowd's noise, but Emily paused, her hand brushing her skirt, and nodded back, her lips twitching in a faint, grateful curve. The attendant watched her go, her heart pounding, then slipped a note to her supervisor with the groomsman's name, her resolve firm, knowing she'd done something small but real to help. A man in a black suit stood up from a table in the back, his presence quiet but commanding, like a storm gathering on the horizon. The room didn't notice him at first, too caught up in the photo chaos, their own cruelty. He moved through the crowd, his steps deliberate, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on Emily. He stopped beside her, took her hand, his grip firm but gentle, and asked loud enough for the room to hear, "Who just did that to my wife?" The laughter died instantly like a flame snuffed out. The groomsman's face drained of color, his grin vanishing, his eyes wide with panic. Guests lowered their phones, their whispers turning to gasps, the air thick with shock. The man's face was calm, but his eyes were steel, scanning the crowd like he was memorizing every face, every laugh. Emily stood beside him, her hand still in his, her expression unreadable, her silence a pillar of strength. The room felt smaller, the tension palpable as everyone waited for what came next. The groom's mother, Ellen Holloway, wife of the state governor, stepped forward, her silver gown shimmering under the ballroom lights, her posture rigid with authority. She looked Emily up and down, her lips pursed like she'd tasted something bitter. "I don't know who you are," she said, her voice loud, carrying across the hushed room, "but this wedding doesn't need any cheap attention from outsiders." Her friends, a clique of political wives in pearls and tailored dresses, nodded, their eyes cold, their hands folded in unison. "This is a private event," Ellen added, her tone dripping with disdain for people who belong here. The room watched, some guests nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Emily met Ellen's gaze, her face unflinching, her eyes steady. "I was invited," she said, her voice low but clear, like a bell ringing in the silence. Ellen scoffed, turning to the crowd with a smirk. "Invited? In that rag? Please spare us." The political wives laughed, their hands fluttering, but the room's unease grew, the mood teetering on the edge of something dangerous. A security guard stationed near the head table watched the exchange, his hand resting on his radio, his posture calm but alert. He'd worked this hotel for a decade, seen the elite tear people apart with words and smiles. But something about Emily caught his eye, her calm, her refusal to shrink under Ellen's glare. He'd seen the guest list earlier, noticed the Brooks name flagged as top tier. He leaned toward his colleague, his voice low, barely audible over the quartet. "That's Blackwell's wife. Holloway's digging her own grave." His colleague nodded, eyes wide, his own radio crackling, ignored. The guard's gaze stayed on Emily, a quiet respect growing in his chest, knowing the room was about to turn upside down. He adjusted his stance, ready for whatever came next, his eyes never leaving her. During Ellen's speech, a florist arranging a centerpiece nearby paused, her hands still on the roses, her apron dusted with pollen. She'd overheard the guest list being finalized, heard Emily's name mentioned with a hushed reverence by the hotel staff. When Ellen's laugh rang out, she frowned, her fingers tightening around a stem, a thorn pricking her thumb. She'd been dismissed by guests like Ellen her whole life, judged for her work clothes, her calloused hands. "She's the one with power," she muttered to a coworker, nodding toward Emily. The coworker glanced over, surprised, then nodded, understanding dawning. The florist wiped her hands, her eyes on Emily, who stood unmoved, and felt a spark of pride, knowing she was witnessing someone who'd rise above the cruelty. Ellen's voice rose again, her words sharp, but the crowd's attention fractured. A retired banker seated at a corner table leaned forward, his tweed suit creased from years of boardrooms. He'd known Emily's father, seen her as a child at charity galas, always quiet, always sharp. He whispered to his wife, "That's Emily Brooks. Her family built half this coast. These fools mocked a titan." His wife gasped, her eyes darting to Emily, who stood beside the man in black. The banker pulled out his phone, texting a colleague at Blackwell Holdings confirming Emily's role. The reply was swift. "She's the architect. Runs the show." He nodded, a grim smile forming his hands clasped tightly, knowing the Holloway's empire was about to crumble under their own weight. Lucas Blackwell. The man beside Emily pulled out his phone, his movements calm but deliberate, like a conductor raising his baton. He dialed a number, his voice steady, cutting through the room's stunned silence. "This is Lucas Blackwell. Effective immediately, all Blackwell Holdings investments in the West Point Resort chain and the Holloway Campaign Fund are canceled. Also tell the media my wife was assaulted at the very wedding sponsored by our company. They'll want to hear about that." The room froze as if time itself had stopped. Lauren, the bride, burst into tears, her hands covering her face, her gown crumpling as she sank into her chair. The groom, pale, his face drained of color, stepped back, his eyes darting to his mother, who stood rigid, her lips trembling. The groomsman who'd pulled Emily's skirt bolted toward the exit, his tie flapping his shoes, slipping on the marble floor, his panic a clumsy spectacle. Guests whispered, phones out again, this time recording Lucas, their hands shaking. Emily stood beside him, her face calm, her hand still in his, her silence a quiet power that needed no words. The room had changed, its foundation cracked. As Lucas spoke, a journalist covering the wedding for a glossy tabloid stood near the bar, her notebook clutched tightly, her pen frozen mid-word. She'd heard Ellen's jab, seen the groomsman's stunt, and recognized Lucas's name instantly. She'd been chasing a Blackwell story for years. Her eyes gleamed, darting between Emily and Lucas, her mind racing. She whispered, "That's the scoop of the decade," to her photographer, who was already zooming in on Emily's steady hand in Lucas's. She scribbled furiously, then texted her editor, "Wedding imploding. Brooks is the key. Front page billionaire drama." Her pulse hammered, knowing the story was about to break wide open, the truth finally spilling out from under the glitz and lies. The fallout was swift and unforgiving, a tidal wave that swept through the night and into the next day. By morning, the wedding of the century was a scandal plastered across every major outlet. Headlines roared, "Billionaire pulls funding after wife humiliated at elite wedding." X-posts went viral, clips of the skirt incident racking up tens of millions of views, comments flooding with outrage and awe. The groomsman, identified as a senator's nephew named Tyler Grayson, was fired from his D.C. internship by noon, his name blacklisted across political circles, his social media accounts deleted in a panic. Ellen Holloway's campaign team issued a public apology, a desperate attempt to stem the bleeding, but donors pulled out en masse, citing ethical concerns. Lauren's event agency sent a frantic press release distancing itself from the regrettable incident, but their phone lines went silent, their bookings canceled overnight. Emily's name trended, dubbed the Linen Queen by users who cheered her quiet strength, her $18 sandals a symbol of defiance. She didn't comment, didn't post, didn't gloat. She left the hotel, her sandals clicking softly. Lucas beside her, their hands linked, the cameras flashing behind them like a fading storm. The consequences didn't stop. The tech billionaire's real estate firm West Point Holdings lost a critical Blackwell contract, their stock diving 20% by the market's open, his smug grin erased from the next day's financial news. The real estate heiress, Chloe Bennett, saw her family's empire face scrutiny after their ties to Blackwell surfaced, their stock plummeting, their boardroom in chaos. The woman in the sequined red dress, Clara Hensley, a socialite with a charity foundation, watched her donors vanish when her laughter was caught on a viral clip, her reputation shredded by the evening news. The fashion influencer Mia Voss lost half her followers overnight, her brand deals collapsing as her mockery video backfired, her once vibrant feed now a ghost town. The Society Matron's Family Charity Gala, scheduled for next month, was boycotted by major donors, her name now synonymous with snobbery. The hedge fund manager Richard Tate faced an SEC probe after his ties to a Blackwell-backed fund were exposed, his yacht party canceled. The celebrity chef Marco Valli saw his TV show dropped by the network, his restaurants empty, his name, a punchline. Emily didn't follow the news, didn't read the posts, didn't care. She went back to her work, her plain bag over her shoulder, her hair loose, her steps unhurried. You've been there, haven't you? Judged for what you wear, who you are, how you carry yourself. You've stayed quiet when it burned, held your ground when it felt impossible. You've carried a truth nobody wanted to see. Emily's story isn't just hers, it's yours. A nod to your strength, your resilience, your refusal to break. You're not alone in that fight. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.